Okay, since it may be difficult to distinguish biological sex by merely examining the genitals, there are other biological markers used. For instance, your chromosomes, protein structures which contain your genetic materials, are also used to determine sex. There are specific chromosomes referred to as sex chromosomes, which marks a person's biological sex. An individual with a set of XY sex chromosomes is said to be a male, while an individual with a set of XX sex chromosomes is said to be a female. The level of some hormones, or the chemicals in our body that are responsible for sustaining bodily processes, are also used as markers. For example, human males tend to have higher levels of testosterone, which is associated to sex drive and aggressions. On the other hand, human females tend to have higher levels of estrogen and progesterone, which are associated to lactation, menstruation, and other female reproductive functions. So, again, one of the biological markers for us to distinguish biological sex is the sex chromosomes. Okay, an individual with a set of XY sex chromosomes is said to be a male, while an individual with a set of XX sex chromosomes is said to be a female. Alright, again, the second biological marker for us to distinguish biological sex is by merely examining its hormones. Again, hormones is a chemical in our body that are responsible for sustaining bodily processes. So, we have here testosterone. It is associated to sex drive and aggressions, while estrogen and progesterone are associated to lactation, menstruation, and other female reproductive functions. Alright, now let's proceed to gender. Okay, so what is gender? Okay, gender refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities of girls, women, boys, men, and gender diverse people. It influences how people perceive themselves and each other, how they act and interact, and the distribution of power and resources in society. Okay, so girls, women, boys, men, and gender diverse people have socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities. It has also an impact on how people perceive themselves and others, how they act and interact, and how power and resources are distributed in society. However, humans are meaning-making organisms. Our ability for higher order thinking and our tendency to create social norms allows us to attach social and cultural meanings to things, including our sex. For example, males are typically expected to be masculine and females are expected to be feminine. Once parents are aware of their child's sex, it's either known male or female, during birth or through prenatal procedures such as ultrasound, they automatically attach social and cultural meanings to their child's sex, and in doing so, they already set an expectation in terms of how their child should behave and how they should treat their child. So, this social dimension of one's sexuality is referred to as gender. So, there are many ways through which gender is manifested. As soon as a new baby arrives in the family, adults surrounding the baby manifest their social interpretation of the baby's sex by the colors assigned to the baby. For example, it is common for families to buy blue apparels and toys when the baby is a male, okay, as the color blue is associated with boyhood. Conversely, female babies are often assigned the color pink, such that families would buy clothes and toys that are color pink because the color is associated with girlhood. Remarkably, the moment a baby is born, the name, the toys, and apparels are picked by parents and relatives based on their interpretation of the baby's sex. So throughout childhood and adolescence, this assignment becomes more complex as the expectations go beyond the kind of clothes worn, but also in terms of how the person must or must not behave. There are set of behaviors that all female individuals must follow, and so with the male individuals, and all are expected to stick to these behaviors or follow to these behaviors that are aligned with their biological sex. This phenomenon of determining the normality of a behavior based on whether it conforms or not to the expectations relative to one's biological sex is referred to as heteronormativity. Okay, so in the Filipino culture, girls are expected to have certain characteristics of being gentle, being caring, and loving, no? While boys are encouraged to be strong, rough, and assertive. These expectations also extend to how men and women are expected to behave, the college courses they take, and the jobs they apply to. However, there are people who do not follow culturally accepted standards of masculinity and femininity, like girls not wanting to wear dresses and boys not wanting to play rough sports. This is a natural variation of the human gender expression. Social and cultural practices change through time. Just 60 years ago, women could not wear pants without social disapproval, and now wearing pants is already an accepted fashion trend among people of different genders. How we express our gender is largely based on our social and cultural setting. Most are comfortable with their sex and gender, men who are masculine and women who are feminine. Each culture has different standards on how to be a man and a woman and how they should present themselves according to their sex and gender. Okay, gender identity is neither binary, no girl or woman, boy or man, nor static. It exists on a spectrum and can change over time. Individuals and groups understand, experience, and express gender in a variety of ways, including the roles they take on, the expectations placed on them, their relationships with others, and the complex ways in which gender is institutionalized in society. Okay, so what is gender roles? Okay, the backdrop of a discussion about gender is gender roles and gender assumptions. There are certain traits and roles that society expects people of each gender to fit in. So experts frequently debate the origins of gender role. While many attribute them to biological factors, others argue that it all stems from sociological factors. Whatever the case it is, the gender role as we know them today originated primarily during the Victorian era. The Victorian era, which spanned the majority of the 19th century, was defined by story ideas about the roles of each gender in society. Men were mostly expected to present themselves in public spheres like politics and business, while women were expected to stay at home and care for their families. Another definition of gender roles is it is defined as an overt public presentation of one's gender. Gender roles are the most conspicuous and easily accessible example not only of how gender has traditionally existed in a male or female dichotomy, but how it is toxic to the individual regardless of gender. While women suffer most notably from gender roles in the workplace, the household, and in society, the gender norms also thrust upon men unfortunate circumstances and injustice. So I have here an illustration. Okay, I have here a summary of the traditional gender stereotypes for both feminine and masculine. So for feminine, this refers to the traits or behaviors of the female. So these are the following. First, not aggressive, dependent, easily influenced, submissive, passive, home-oriented, easily hurt emotionally, indecisive, talkative, gentle, sensitive to others' feelings, very desirous of security, cries a lot, emotional, verbal, kind, tactful, and nurturing. While for the masculine, no, these are expected traits or roles of the males. First is aggressive. Males should be independent, not easily influenced, dominant, active, worldly, not easily hurt emotionally, decisive, not at all talkative, tough, less sensitive to others' feelings, not very desirous of security, they rarely cries, they are logical, analytical, cruel, blunt, and not nurturing. Okay, now let's go back to the definition of gender identity. Gender identity is the most important determinant of gender. Okay, this is also the internal sense of self that states your gender regardless of the sex assigned at birth. Some of the common gender identities are man, woman, non-binary, and genderqueer. So, gender identity is our internal experience of gender. So, a person's assigned at birth sex does not always align with their deeply held sense of gender identity, in which case they may be transgender and other gender preferences of the people. So, okay, under gender is cis or cisgender. So, what is cis or cisgender? The terms cis and cisgender are used to describe a person whose gender identity aligns with the assumptions their culture makes about members of their sex. A person who is assigned a female at birth and identifies as male or as female rather is considered cis. Also, a person who is assigned male at birth and identifies as male is also considered cis. So, cisgender denotes individuals whose personal identity corresponds with their birth sex. For example, if you were born a male and you identify yourself as a male, you are considered as cisgender. Also, if you were born a female and you identify yourself as a female, you are also considered as cisgender. Okay, next, trans or transgender. A trans person's gender identity doesn't match the assumed characteristics of their assigned sex. A person who was assigned male at birth might feel that their identity and sense of self are aligned more closely with a female identity. Okay, transgender is a general term that describes people whose gender identity or their internal sense of being male, female, or something else does not match the sex they were assigned at birth. By contrast, the term cisgender describes people whose gender identity aligns with the sex they were assigned at birth. Again, I will emphasize that cisgender, it describes people whose gender identity aligns with the sex they were assigned at birth, while transgender is a term used to describe people whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. Also, trans or transgender is an umbrella term referring to people with diverse gender identities and expressions that differ from stereotypical gender norms. It also includes, but is not limited to, people who identify as transgender, trans woman, male to female, trans man, female to male, transsexual, cross-dressers, or gender non-conforming, gender variant, or gender queer. Okay, next is non-binary. Okay, when we say non-binary, it is a person who identifies as non-binary, feels that their gender identity doesn't align within the male or female division. Non-binary is an umbrella term that represents a variety of people. There is no single non-binary gender identity. Okay, non-binary people identify as being a gender that's not exclusively male or female. Okay, you might see yourself as mix of both genders, somewhere in between them, or neither. The way you perceive your gender may not align with traditional views of the biological features you were born with. Okay, so what is gender expression? Okay, gender expression refers to how you express your gender identity. Okay, so gender identity is also referred to as your gender expression or gender presentation. So this is a combination of clothing, your physical appearance, behavior, and mannerisms that convey your gender identity. Okay, gender expression also refers to how a person publicly expresses or presents their gender. This can include behavior and outward appearance such as dress, hair, makeup, body language, and voice. A person's chosen name and pronoun are also common ways of expressing gender. Others perceive a person's gender through these attributes. So, gender expression can be influenced by a person's gender identity, but it is important to remember that these two things are not the same. Why? Because gender identity refers to our internal experience of gender. Okay, while gender expression often refers to how a person experiences and expresses various aspects of the male and female gender binary. So it may also encompass characteristics that may be described as masculine, feminine, gender neutral, androgynous, and gender conforming. Okay, to fully understand the relationship between gender and society, let us first know the definition of gender as the World Health Organization or WHO trusted source explains. Gender is a socially constructed characteristics of women and men, such as norms, roles, and relationships of and between groups of women and men. It varies from society to society and can be changed. Gender roles, as well, in some societies are more rigid than in others. However, these are not always set in stone, and roles and stereotypes can shift over time. Okay, let us now proceed to the difference between sex and gender. Okay, so this is the presentation about the difference between sex and gender. First, sex is this primarily refers to physical attributes, the body characteristics, notably sex organ, which are distinct in majority of individuals, while gender is the composite of attitudes and behavior of men and women, masculinity and femininity. Sex is biologically determined by genes and hormones, while gender is learned and perpetuated primarily through the family, education, religion, were dominant, and is an acquired identity. So gender is also influenced by the different factors, sociological factors, because of the different institutions that people interact with. Next is sex is relatively fixed or constant through time and across cultures, while gender, because it is socialized, it may be variable through time and across cultures. So the understanding of gender may vary from one place to another, and the concepts and understanding of the concept gender may change over time depending on the culture of the society where an individual is in. So, sexuality encompasses personal and social meanings as well as sexual behavior and biology. It includes ways our bodies develop and respond sexually. It also includes sexual acts, kissing, touching, intercourse, includes feelings about these activities and responses. Also includes what we think is right and wrong. Good or bad includes life experiences that have shaped these feelings and values. Is gender identity the same as gender expression? Okay, so gender identity is your personal experience of your gender, while your gender expression refers to how you express gender through clothing, your hairstyles, behaviors, and different social roles. The expression of your gender through the way you behave and dress is an important part of your self identity and essential to your mental health and well being. Okay? Many transgender people hide their gender expression in public for fear of negative reactions, violence, or discrimination. But of course, there are also other people who don't who are not ashamed, no, to show to the world their gender preference in public, no, because they are happy expressing their own preference. While again, there are others transgender who are afraid to show to the public their gender expression because of the negative feedbacks and comments of the people. Okay, so for gender versus sexuality, sexuality is who you are sexually or romantically attracted to. So examples of sexualities include straight people are attracted to people of the opposite gender, such as a man who is attracted to women. Gay or lesbian people are attracted to people of the same gender, such as a man who is attracted to men, while bisexual or pansexual people are attracted to people of multiple genders. Sexuality and gender are two separate parts of a person's identity. They are not automatically connected. How someone expresses their gender also does not necessarily correlate with whom they are attracted to. The complexities of the human sexuality can be quite overwhelming. We need to look at our own experience and our journey of discovering our sense of being a man and a woman for us to understand others. We also need to engage in conversations with others for us to appreciate the many different phases of human sexuality. A baby is born and is given an assigned sex based on its genitals. In toddler years, they are raised to be a man or a woman based on accepted social and cultural standards. We know that these standards change through time. What is not acceptable now may be acceptable in the future. Adolescence is when we discover our emotional and sexual attraction towards other people. For most, it is easy to identify who they are attracted to, but for others, it can be a long and difficult process. Fostering an inclusive environment wherein everyone feels safe is very important at this stage. So these are the references for the lesson 1. Okay, so that's all. Thank you for listening.